My dad went to prison. That's how it all began. It's a bit strange talking about this now because it's something I haven't thought a great deal about in a long time. And fair warning to any of my Jehovah's Witness friends watching this video, it is going to contain information the Watchtower organisation doesn't want you to know. Information that they've branded apostate. If that bothers you, I recommend you reconsider watching this video. You see, I was a regular pioneer, I was an elder, I worked with the LDC before it was even called the LDC, I gave talks at assemblies, oversaw groups, helped out in the foreign language field, yada yada yada. All in all, I was a good little brother. I mean, I had a beautiful wife, 2 great kids, a nice job, a nice home, so why did I leave? Well, Kaylee and I did a joint video a few years back about why we disassociated. Of course, when you disassociate, they don't let the congregation know that, do they? They just make the same announcement as though you were disfellowshipped. You see, it's really sneaky, and also a very clever ploy, to be honest. Because if people knew you disassociated, they'd start to ask questions. And the organisation doesn't like it when you ask too many questions, as we all know. But if everyone thinks you've been disfellowshipped, well, they might not know what you did wrong, but you did do something wrong, right? And that's good enough for them. Like I said, my family becoming Jehovah's Witnesses began with my dad going to prison when I was a kid. And I'll explain how. So about 5 years later, when I was about 9 or 10, my dad was released from prison. It had been just me, my mom, and my sister for a while, and it was quite difficult. Then suddenly, this institutionalised man who expected everything to be done a certain way rejoined the family, and it suddenly became even more difficult. And at that stage, I didn't remember an awful lot about my father when he lived with us. He went away when I was about 4 or 5, right? And as you can imagine, this situation put our family in quite a vulnerable position. With regards to joining a new religion, we were white for harvesting, to borrow an expression some in the organisation like to use. Fast forward 15 years, and I made a ministerial servant. A few years after that, at the end of a Sunday meeting, I'm brought into the little cold room in the loft of the Kingdom Hall to meet with an elder and the circuit overseer. This is where I start talking about things some of you probably aren't ready to hear. First of all, know that I didn't make the decision to leave the organisation lightly. And I certainly didn't want to lose all my family and friends. But that wasn't up to me. If you're that person watching who has doubts, because let's face it, we all had doubts, but isn't ready to know what they need to know, you might want to tuck this video away until a day when you are ready. Anyway, as I walked up the stairs into that little asbestos-lined room that the congregation couldn't do anything about since the governing body took all their funds away, part of me wondered what on earth I did wrong, which in itself speaks volumes. I couldn't imagine any other reason the circuit overseer and elders might want to talk to me. I walked in, and much to my amazement, the circuit overseer shook my hand and said, "Congratulations on your appointment as an elder." And my response was this: "Don't I get a say in that decision?" And the elder and the circuit overseer chuckled. They thought it was hilarious. They thought I was joking, but I can assure you, I was not joking. Kaylee will tell you, not a lot phases me. I'm not the kind of guy to freak out in the middle of an emergency. I generally keep a level head when other people lose their marbles. But this thing, it caught me totally off guard. I mean, only 2 months before this, I had told Kaylee that I never wanted to be an elder. Not only had I been questioning my faith for the guts of about a year, I mean, there were other things happening. On the outside, I ticked all the right boxes, right? I mean, I was a regular pioneer for a while, and even when I had to stop that, I auxiliary pioneered when I could. I was always out on the field service. I rarely missed meetings, even when we started having children. And I did my best to answer during the Watchtower, even though I hated it, and it was something I always struggled with. I was involved with narrating publications on jw.org. But you see, a few years prior to being made an elder, I had started publishing novels full of content the organisation would deem questionable. My whole life, I've had this burning desire inside of me to write stories. And one day, I just couldn't ignore that calling any longer. I was also doing other things I shouldn't have been doing as a Jehovah's Witness. So when the Holy Spirit appointed me to a position of authority, well, like I said, mind blown. And the funny thing is, I missed the midweek elders meeting where the circuit overseer was supposed to break the news to me. I was supposed to attend that as a ministerial servant. I just completely forgot. And they still made me an elder. Anyway, being made an elder accelerated my waking up. It gave me a glimpse behind the proverbial curtain, if you will. It confirmed many doubts, and it gave birth to many other doubts. I remained an elder for about 2 years, but once I got a look under that hood, there was no going back. And I'm sure it frustrated them greatly when they eventually lost another Irish brother. You see, not a lot of people know this, but the Watchtower organisation has always struggled to recruit Irish people. You see, most congregations I've been to here, and I've been to quite a few, had a large contingent of foreigners, usually from England, with the Irish JWs being a very small minority. For example, when I lived in the Republic of Ireland, there were about 60 people in the Letterkenny Kingdom Hall, and there were 4 Irish people, and I was one of them. The thing is, Irish people have deep roots elsewhere. They're stubborn as hell, which I can attest to, and recent history has taught them to smell BS from a long way off. While I was an elder, the organisation decided it wanted to make inroads into the Irish-speaking community, as a way to subvert all that. So they established a bunch of Irish language groups around the island, and I ended up helping oversee one of those because I was fluent, or am fluent, in speaking Irish. And we got a visit from the circuit overseer one day, and he told us that we could break into the Irish speaking community in all these different ways, and we had to befriend people and not tell them who we really were until they really trusted us, even if that took years. And that struck me as a bit weird and a bit twisted. It was kind of like we were worming our way into an established community, like spies or something, like in a movie. And I narrated some of the Irish publications on jw.org as well, which probably aren't there anymore. I mean, they probably removed them. I don't know. I haven't checked. But the whole thing struck me as really desperate. I mean, only a handful of people speak Irish these days. But those little doubts were nothing compared to some of the other things I was exposed to as an elder. Before I talk about this next part, I want to make something really, really clear. And that is that most of the elders I served with were some of the nicest people I've ever met. In fact, most of the brothers and sisters were the kind of people who would take their shirts off their own backs for you. And several times, that's exactly what some of them did for my family. This is not an attack on those good people. I respect those brothers and sisters, and I still appreciate their kindness, even after they abandoned me and my family, even after all the years they've shunned us. However, there are a few rotten eggs in every basket, and the Watchtower organisation has created a twisted environment for those rotten eggs to thrive and flourish. And unfortunately, even the good people support that environment, whether they realise it or not. And when I became an elder, I got to see a lot of that for what it was. I mean, I remember one elders meeting where I was sitting in a room with about 7 adult men, and they were discussing the brothers in the hall who had a masturbation problem. And all I could think was, these are my friends we're talking about. I really don't need to know what they and their meat sticks get up to in their spare time. I mean, I always knew these kinds of discussions happened, but hearing it for myself really brought home just what an overreach that really was. That and similar elders meetings really highlighted the controlling nature of the organisation. I mean, Almighty God, an omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent being, had nothing better to do than to watch brothers jerk off in their bedrooms? Really? Anyway, I mean, the elders kept particularly close tabs on people with marital problems, and a lot of effort seemed to go into keeping an eye on disfellowship people. And that all felt really invasive to me. It was just like invading people's privacy and just watching them so closely. It didn't occur to me at the time, but looking back, they tended to brush things that were actually important under the carpet. Things like CSA and other really important, difficult subjects. And elders weren't exactly pleasant in their dealings with the sheep they were meant to shepherd at all times. A few months into being made an elder, I had to call another brother an elder. It was a friend of my, a dad of my best friend of all people. And I mean, this guy was far from perfect like every other elder, but he helped my family out a great deal over the years, and he believed in me when no one else did. And here I was, the noobiest noob in Noob Town, telling this guy he was being removed as an elder. And the reasons for his removal were actually pretty questionable to begin with. Talk about awkward. And talk about being thrown into the deep end. Talk about cruelty. It was really cruel. And looking back, I realised that some elders didn't like this guy, so they chose me on purpose to deliver this message because, you know, I was one of the young people he helped out. So they used me to humiliate him further. And I was too stupid at the time to know what was happening. I mean, how twisted is that? Is that not insane? And that's one of the things that never sat well with me, the politics, because being an elder was 90% politics. And if there's one thing I hate, it's office politics. I can't stand them. I mean, I had a lot of bad gut feelings, but I usually ignored them, telling myself that Satan and his demons were testing me like they tested Jesus, even though deep down, I mean, I didn't really believe that either. But my love of public speaking, that's what really got me. That's what really tipped things. I mean, I really enjoyed giving talks, so I ended up giving one every other week. After a while, though, the outlines felt a bit stagnant, and I felt like the audience deserved more than just me spouting the same old stuff over and over and over again. I liked giving one particular talk, Why You Can Trust the Bible, but it made some pretty outlandish claims and statements, so I thought to myself, how can I talk to people about trust when I don't really trust this material myself 100%? So I decided to do a little research into secular sources to better support claims about the 1914 prophecy being true, etc. And I mean, my entire faith hinged on that one prophecy, and I barely understood it myself. And then they went through the overlapping generation thing, in which just made it even more impossible to understand, but more on that some other time maybe. And I was very careful to avoid any of that apostate stuff. I mean, I didn't want their wicked lies to make me mentally diseased or something. So I stuck to the official sources like museum archives, research papers, just the way the other publications used. And even then I felt a pang of guilt, but I needed answers more satisfying than Jehovah will reveal it in his own time, which is just their version of God works in mysterious ways. Anyway, I stumbled upon an article in the archives of the British Museum, and it discussed the destruction of Jerusalem in 587 or 586 BCE, and the cuneiform tablets were in there as well, etc. But there was no mention of 607 BCE. I thought there had to be a typo or something was missing, so I kept digging, and I could hardly believe what I was reading. No matter how many historical references I checked, there was no mention of 607 BCE. Well, long story short, that opened the door, and the rest, as they say, is history. I gave the memorial talk a few months later, and that was a horrible experience. You know, I just read off the outline like a robot, and my love of public speaking was shattered at that point, and a few people even commented after and said it wasn't as good as some of my other talks, and I had to stop myself from telling them why. And 2 years after being made an elder, I stood up and told them I wouldn't do it anymore, citing depression as my reason. And I remember handing over my elder's book and the Kingdom Hall keys. I didn't have to do that bit, but I did anyway. And one of the elders met with me later and he said, you know, Patrick, that felt really final. And I wanted to tell him that was because it was final, but of course I had to bite my tongue. And having to pretend I was mentally unwell and, you know, suffering depression was pretty demeaning. The elders kept sending friends to try and encourage me to come back to the meetings, and you know, I had to play along. And you know, depression runs in my family, and I have had bouts of depression over the years, but I was by no means depressed at that time. Even if I was undergoing, you know, a really traumatic experience, it was one of the worst times in my life. But I had to stall them as long as I could, so I could help my wife and kids escape. By the time the next memorial rolled around, Kaylee and the kids were really ill, so I attended on my own. Maybe attended is a strong word, because I turned up a little late because of helping out with the children. And when I arrived, I walked through the doors into the empty foyer, and I took a look around and I said, "Paddy, what the hell are you even doing here?" And I turned around and walked straight back out again. And that was my final meeting. I feigned being depressed for another year and gradually helped Kaylee wake up. But that's another video for another time. Suffice it to say that I gave Kaylee several nudges in the right direction, but the elders did more to wake her up than I ever could, so thank you, elders. I've got plenty of other stories about things I saw when I was an elder, but we'll chat about those in future videos. I just wanted this video to be a bit more about some of the things that eventually led to my waking up, despite having pioneered, having had responsibilities, and largely because I was an elder, which is ironic. In the end, I just couldn't handle that level of cognitive dissonance. Anyway, I hope that gives you some insight into the organisation, into how I woke up and what it was like to wake up as an elder. And if you've recently woken up yourself, or if you're still in the process of healing, I wish you the very best on your journey to freedom. My heart goes out to you. I wish you the best of luck, and I hope everyone has a great day.